Circle the correct answer. The first question is the amplitude of y equals negative 3 halves cosine 4 pi x is, we have 5 choices. So we know that for a function y equals a cosine or sine, in our case we have cosine, and some number x, omega x, when we have this function a sine omega x or a cosine omega x, the absolute value of a, the number outside, take absolute value, that's the amplitude. So in this case negative 3 halves is a number, outside is a. When we take the absolute value of negative 3 halves, we get positive 3 halves. So that's the amplitude. So amplitude is always a positive number. Okay, so amplitude is absolute value of a. And for the same function, we can find the period, that's given by 2 pi over this coefficient in front of x, 2 pi over omega. So for this question, then for our question, 2 pi over, because it asks to find the period, here is omega, that's 4 pi. So 2 pi over omega, which is 4 pi, 2 pi over 4 pi, pi cancel, 2 over 4 is 1/2. So this is the period. Okay, let's move to the third question. The quadrant in which the angle theta lies if cosine theta is negative and tangent theta is also negative. So which quadrant? So let's look at all 4. We know that all students take calculus, so all trig functions are positive here, sine and cosecant positive, tangent positive, cosine positive. Okay, only cosine and secant positive. So we want to have the quadrant where cosine theta is negative. So all positive, cosine positive. So either this quadrant or this quadrant, because cosine is negative in these two quadrants. And at the same time we want tangent to be negative, but in the third quadrant has a t, tangent is positive, so this is the quadrant, second quadrant. In the second quadrant, cosine is negative as well as tangent is negative. Okay, if you look at A, S, T, C, yes means only sine is positive, cosine and tangent are both negative. Okay, let's move to the next question. Third question, we need to find, no, fourth, the equation of a sine function that has an amplitude of 2 and period of 4 pi. Okay, so y equals a sine omega x, y equals a sine omega x. So like y equals amplitude sine omega x, amplitude is 2. Okay, so when we take the absolute value of a, we should get 2. So negative 2, absolute value of negative 2 is 2, absolute value of 2 is also 2. So negative 2, absolute value of negative 2 is 2. And so from this we cannot say anything, because for each function here, everyone's amplitude is 2, because when we take the absolute value of the number in front of this sine function, we get 2. And it says now the period of 4 pi, and we know that period is given by this formula. Period t is 2 pi over omega, where omega is the coefficient in front of x. Like for this question, this is omega. For this question, this is omega. 1/2 is omega. Pi over 2 is omega. Pi over 2 is omega. Now the period t is given 4 pi. Okay, so from this we should be able to find the correct function. So let's work on this. So let me, there is a couple of things here. Okay, the period of 4 pi, and we know that period is given by 2 pi over omega. So I want to find this omega. From this omega, then I can choose the right function. So period is given 4 pi. So this is 4 pi equals 2 pi over omega. 4 pi is same as 4 pi over 1. Now cross multiply and find the value of omega. Omega times 4 pi equals 2 pi. Now divide both sides by 4 pi and get omega. So omega is 2 pi over 4 pi. That's 1/2. 2 pi over 4 pi is 1/2. So omega 1/2 is here. This is omega is pi over 2, 2, 2. So this is the right function. So this is the function which has, this is a sine function which has an amplitude of 2, because absolute value of -2 is 2. And if you want to find the period of this function, that comes out to be 4 pi. Okay, because period is 2 pi over omega. Omega is like 1/2, and we know that 2 pi over 1/2 is, this 2 goes on the top, 2 times 2, 4 pi. So we have 4 pi. Okay, this is how we find a sine function when amplitude and period is given. And the last question here is true or false. The range of y equals tangent x is the set of all real numbers. True, because if you graph tangent x, you will get vertical asymptotes, but the function is going forever to forever. So this is a true statement. The range of y equals cosine x is -pi/2 to pi/2. Let's look at the cosine function. If we graph y equals cosine x, so we get this. Okay, it's going forever. Okay, so it goes all the way to 1, at most 1, and at least -1. So the range is in fact -1 to 1. So the range of y equals cosine x is -1 to 1. So this is not true, this is false. Okay, the y-intercept of the sine function is 0, 1. So let's look at sine function and we can conclude about this statement. So sine function, so we get this forever. Okay, this is, anyways. Now the y-intercept, okay, there is only one place where the sine function intersects y-axis, so that's 0, 0. So this is not true, false. Okay, only y-intercept is 0, 0. In fact, the y-intercept for cosine function is in fact 0, 1. Okay, for cosine function that's 0, 1, but for the sine function it should be 0, 0. So this is a false statement.